and I do good with prompts. So just let me know, okay?
Hey, what's
I
up,
like
guys?
using a
You're kicking with
whiteboard.
East Coast Rollers. I'm Rob, C5, C6, T10, Quadriplegic. I have my lovely girlfriend, Tara, and now I'm going to hand it over to Angry Quad.
Sean Peter McCartney, aka or affectionately known as the Angry Quad. C456 incomplete, Asia C. However, today we are joined with a special guest, a gentleman I had an opportunity to work with for a few times, Dr. Jacob Goldsmith from the Veterans Administration in the Bronx. Doc, by all means, tell us who you are.
Well, thank you so much for the invite. Really honored to be a guest on here. My name is Jacob Goldsmith. I'm a spinal cord injury researcher, and as you said, I work at the Bronx VA, and I also work at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. I have a background in exercise physiology, so learning how different forms of exercise can improve health and improve different clinical populations. And then I did my PhD at Florida State University, and I actually was working with traumatic brain injury. And I was actually working with rodent models and doing very mechanistic work, like if we upregulate this protein, what does it do to contractility of a blood vessel? And how does TBI affect blood flow to the brain? And how can we improve that? But after doing animal research for about 4 years, I had enough. It kind of killed my soul a little bit. You injure animals, take care of them, and then, continue that process. And so I wanted to get back to clinical research and working with humans, which is where it's what I did my undergrad, my master's. And right during COVID, I graduated. It was very hard to find a clinical postdoc, but I was lucky to find one in the VA in Richmond, Virginia. And this guy was doing really cool research with spinal cord injury. And I'd never really been a part of that world at all. And I was one of those people that thought, when you hear spinal cord injury, you're like, okay, muscles don't work, back then. And then I started working in that lab and working with veterans with spinal cord injury and realizing the huge heterogeneous population in terms of level of injury, severity of injury, how they manifest, the different secondary complications, and working with, I work with non-veterans too, but working with the spinal cord injury population and veterans specifically, just trying to find different interventions that can improve any aspect of their life. If it can improve their overall quality of life, it just told me that this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, so it's a little strange because most people see, and that's what they know.
Yeah.
All they see is somebody in a wheelchair, maybe they have an event, maybe whatever it might be. But the complications are so much deeper than eye level, man. It's just insane. But I'm really glad you got on board because I really enjoy working with you.
Thank you. Same to you, man. Absolutely. Don't talk. No, go ahead.
I accidentally interrupted the doctor, and I really wanted to know about his testosterone research.
Which part is that? Sorry. Oh, yeah. So, let me get back to the whole thing that I do now. The guy I started working with at the Richmond VA was doing some testosterone studies. And so I started reading into that literature, and I started seeing that there were some huge gaps and huge questions that hadn't been answered. And then I started looking closer, and I saw how few studies had been done in spinal cord injury specifically, and how prevalent the issue of low testosterone is. And I was like, wait a minute, why isn't anybody looking into this? And so through that, I found that, everybody thinks of testosterone as, get big and strong, good for muscles, makes you masculine, but it does so much more. It's involved in everything. It's involved in body composition, metabolism, strength, of course, but it's involved in mood, depression symptoms. It's involved in cardiovascular function, your blood pressure, your heart rate. It's involved in neural function and control of your muscles, not just like how big the muscle is, but the signal being sent from your brain to the muscle. Testosterone is very important for that. And when I was in Richmond, I was seeing that a lot of these studies were being done with transdermal, or a patch you put on the skin and stuff like that. And I happened to come across some literature about intranasal testosterone. And I had been reading all these things about how if you can get testosterone to the nervous system, it can be metabolized to these different chemicals called dihydrotestosterone and estradiol. So testosterone is like the primary hormone, but it can be converted to these other two hormones, and all three of them are crucial for neural function and motor function, control of movement, control of cardiovascular function. And so not just in men, hugely important in women as well. Yeah. So they're from different sources, and their magnitudes different, like the reference range, but hugely important for men and women. There's been much less work done in women after spinal cord injury, but there are a few small reports that show that there are some dysfunction in endocrine function after injury too. And so that's one lane I want to pursue in the future. But right now, I'm on what's called so I work with the Department of Veteran Affairs, and I have a career development award. And what that means is it's a small grant, essentially, that gives me a little bit of money, but I have like this team of mentors behind me that are experts in, like you mentioned, Noam. Noam's an expert in neuro recovery. I have Jill Weck, that's an expert in cardiovascular recovery. I have Josh Yarrow, that's an expert in testosterone. And so I'm learning from all these people how to conduct a good study and how to make sure it's a study that the community cares about and like wants to be a part of, and also that the outcomes that I'm looking at are important and people care about. Yeah, absolutely. So,
hey Doc, curious, as it pertains to testosterone, would you say it's an electrolyte enhancement type drug? As it pertains to, fortifying signals going here, there, and everywhere and function, does it make connections tighter and stronger? Or perhaps signals coming from wherever to whoever?
It definitely can make signals stronger. And I think it can improve the balance of electrolytes. I'm not really sure about the direct connection between testosterone and electrolyte balance, but I definitely know that having low testosterone circulating through your body is linked to cardiovascular issues and arrhythmias that are definitely electrolyte dependent. And so, well, you've done my study, you've done the first visit. So that one of the things I test is, so let me back up for just a second. So all mammals have this thing called the mammalian dive reflex. And when we dive underwater, our body's like, we need to preserve oxygen so we don't die. So our brain sends a signal to our heart. It's like, hey, slow down. We need to slow down because we're using too much oxygen. And so that signal goes to the heart rate slows down, the person calms down, and they're able to survive. And so if we can test that mechanism, which there's different ways to do, we can either do a full dive test, or we can put a cold pack on the face that triggers that same mechanism. We can see whether that pathway is intact. And that pathway is super important because, I throw around terms, but like the autonomic nervous system is essentially a balance between sympathetic, that fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, that rest and digest, right? So you want a pretty good balance between those, because if your fight or flight is always up, then your heart's working overload. All your organs are working overload. Pretty dangerous. But if that rest and digest signal can come up and kind of mellow you out, that can keep you healthy for a long time. But what can happen as we age, even without injury, is that sympathetic starts to dominate and our vessels become more constricted. Our heart works harder. We get more unhealthy. But after injury, that pathway specifically is affected, and sympathetic goes way up to try to compensate, depending on the level and severity. But if you have low testosterone, that balance is completely shifted, and sympathetic dominates over parasympathetic and does not have a good prognosis, or does not have good outcomes. And so what we're looking at now is, can testosterone improve that rest and digest signal to improve that balance and improve overall cardiovascular health? And we have some preliminary evidence to say that, well, there's other published reports too, but we have some preliminary evidence to say that testosterone is crucial for that rest and digest, mellow out, calm down reflex that we have. Yeah.
I asked the doctor about hypogonadism based off his videos that I had watched.
Gonadism. Yeah.
Gonadism.
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that. That's a fantastic question. So in terminology, different things get thrown around a lot. So low testosterone means that when I take your blood sample and I measure your total testosterone, that it's below what the clinical guideline says it should be, which for men is around 300 nanograms per deciliter. But that's just low testosterone, also called testosterone deficiency. But if you have low testosterone in combination with signs and symptoms like fatigue, depression, lack of motivation, there's all these different symptoms, then then you're diagnosed with hypogonadism. Exactly. Yeah. And so there's like a range that you want to be in for your total testosterone. For men, it's typically between 300 and around 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. If you're in that range, you're considered normal or normogonadal.
Right.
But the thing is, testosterone doesn't circulate on its own throughout your body. Only a really small percentage, about 1 to 3%, is circulating unbound and can freely enter any cell. It can go through the blood-brain barrier and get to your nervous system. But a lot of it is circulating bound to the protein albumin. But that, when it binds to albumin, it's a pretty weak binding. And so it can also kind of get into the cells and into the nervous system. But the majority of your testosterone is circulating really tightly bound to this big protein called sex hormone binding globulin. And SHBG, that protein's produced by your liver, and we don't know why, but there's been reports that after injury, that increases through the roof compared to uninjured people. So over the years, that protein increases as we age for everyone, but after spinal cord injury, it increases a lot. And so the more testosterone that's kind of captured by that protein may not be able to get into the cells or to your nervous system to actually have an effect. And so what I do in my study is I try to measure your total testosterone, so the total amount, but also your free testosterone that's circulating completely unbound, and your bioavailable. And bioavailable is that free plus whatever is weakly bound to albumin. And that gives you an idea of, I guess, your androgen status and how easily that testosterone can have an effect in your body. And so because that big protein SHBG increases so much, I've seen in my studies several people that if they're just getting a clinical test, they completely normal. If I just check total testosterone, you're completely normal, nothing wrong with you, out the door. But if I look at all these other things, I can see that their total's fine, but their free and bioavailables horrible, like incredibly low, probably not getting to the nervous system. And so I think it's crucial that we test the entire profile. So total, free, bioavailable, and also its metabolites, dihydrotestosterone and estradiol or estrogen, and also the signal that's coming from the brain to make it, which are called the gonadotropins. I don't need to get into those details, but I think it's crucial that people in the spinal cord injury community know this so that they can go to their doctor and be like, please test this. I want to know this, and I want to know how it's changing as I age. Yeah.
I agree 1,000%.
I'm sorry, what?
Is there natural things to try, lifestyle habits, dietary additions that can support testosterone?
Absolutely. So everything affects testosterone. It is very variable day to day. So if you're incredibly stressed, your testosterone can be low. If you have an acute illness, your testosterone can be low. If you had a hard night of drinking, your testosterone is probably going to be low. So all these things affect it. And so in general, getting adequate quality sleep, 6 to 8 hours per night, quality sleep, doing your best to do that. And then in terms of nutrition, you want to get adequate protein, absolutely. But you also want to make sure that you're hitting your micronutrients. So a lot of people talk about macronutrients, proteins, carb, fat. That's incredibly important. But micronutrients are also important. Are you getting the vitamins and minerals that you need on a daily basis? And so things like an app called Chronometer, it's kind of similar to MyFitnessPal, where you can scan what you're eating. It'll tell you how many proteins, carbs, and fats you're eating throughout a day. This Chronometer can tell you if you're getting your vitamins and minerals. So it breaks it down even further. And I think it's really important that you're getting your micronutrient values every day. You're getting quality sleep. You're getting physical activity. You're getting social interaction. All of these things are hugely important for overall health, but also testosterone status.
Would you say that a static lifestyle is really not good whatsoever? Open your mouth, move your body, either talk shit or do something and get involved some way so that just that whole, is depression. Do you think that a form of depression is really, really bad?
Yeah, I think it's a vicious cycle too, because when people get depressed, you don't really want to move a lot. You don't really want to talk a lot. And so you stay still, you don't interact socially, and then your depression gets worse. And so, I think your brain tries to trick you sometimes and say, this feels comfortable. This feels like what I'm supposed to do. When really, no, we know you need to be as active as possible. And, even if you're working with paralyzed muscles, there's different forms of electrical stimulation and magnetic stimulation to activate those muscles and get blood flow to that area, improve overall metabolic health. So I think it's crucial to be as active as you can without, you don't want to overdo it. But in general, I don't think people are at risk of overdoing it. I think they're at risk of underdoing it. And I also think that social component's huge. Being able to get out and have a strong group of people around you that can support you, support system. Move. Autism, yeah. Absolutely.
I had asked Dr. Goldsmith, what do I need to ask my doctor to get these types of tests done?
It's a great question. So what I would do personally, and I have to say this, I have a PhD, a doctorate, and I'm not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice. But what I would do personally is I would go to the doctor and I would say, I've been reading a lot of research and it seems that, my androgen or testosterone profile, I need to have an understanding of it. And then there's specific biomarkers that I want tested. I don't want just total. I don't want just free. I want the entire profile. So I want total, free, bioavailable. I want my binding proteins, albumin and sex hormone binding globulin. And I want testosterone's metabolites, dihydrotestosterone, and estradiol. And then if you want to go even deeper, you can say, I want to capture the signal that's telling my body to make testosterone, which is the gonadotropins. So that's follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So one of those is helping you produce testosterone. The other one is helping ensure that you stay fertile. And so once you have that entire picture, then you can understand where I'm at. And if anything in your health changes in the years to come, you can have that rechecked and be like, oh, wow, when I was feeling fine, my sex hormone binding globulin was here. But now that I'm not feeling good, my sex hormone binding globulin is here. I wonder if we need to do something about that. Same for testosterone. And the cool thing about testosterone, there's a lot of cool things about testosterone, but the cool thing about taking it, it's called exogenously, so taking testosterone replacement therapy, is after spinal cord injury, that binding protein can go up a lot. But if you have low testosterone and you take testosterone replacement, it can actually help drive down that protein a little bit, which helps free up more testosterone to get to your cells and your nervous system.
I was just being funny and asked Angry Quad if he was okay.
Dude, I'm all right. I've never settled, man. You should know that by now. It's just, the testosterone and everything, I've been following a lot of those things for ever and ever and ever. And you were just talking about tests and finding out what your levels are. Now, yeah. I pretty much know the answer to this. However, I will pose it anyway. Would it be a good idea if we just had a testosterone test or an estradiol test, or regardless of whatever it is, and you get that information, however you store it, however it might be? I would imagine it's a pretty good idea to hold on to that so that, you can almost do your own little form of research and be able to reference back to the information you have, depending on how you feel, how you felt at that point in time, and perhaps maybe keep a couple little notes to be like, all right, this is where I was and this is how I felt at that point in time, whatever it might be. All right, so then in turn, you're doing your own little mini research and keeping tabs on yourself.
Exactly, yeah. And, in the field, some people call that a biological passport. So it's keeping a log, a snapshot of like all your biomarkers as you age to see like, well, when I was feeling fine, what did everything look like? And now that I don't feel fine, what does everything look like? And if you track your own data over time, that's hugely powerful. Then you can go to the doctor and be like, look at this. Not only have I read these papers and seen what this can do, but changed in me, and so has my function or my mood or whatever. So I think that's hugely important. Absolutely.
I had asked Dr. Goldsmith, how often should these tests be done?
So I want my research and the people I collaborate with eventually change clinical practice guidelines so that it's standard after spinal cord injury to have it tested at least once per year. So I think it's, sorry. What'd you say?
Tara said if he could have it his way, how often would people be tested?
I think every 6 months is a really good idea. Sorry, I didn't catch this last part of that. I think every 6 months is a pretty good, it is expensive to have those tests done, depending on your insurance and everything like that. But I would like it if it was standard of care that if you're injured, that stuff gets assessed immediately and then it's assessed every 6 months after. Because there's some data to suggest the earlier we catch it and start treating it, the better the ultimate outcome. And this is just anecdotal, but I know this guy, my friend, he runs a rehab center out in Utah. And he came up to me after a presentation one year at a conference. And he was like, I had a great doctor when I was injured. And he tested my testosterone, found it was low, and started treating me. And I think that's why I've been doing so well. And, that's his one experience. I'm not saying that that's everyone's experience, but I think that this is a hugely important hormone that is too often ignored, especially in this population. And in my preliminary, I'm primarily a spinal cord injury researcher, but my boss is an ALS doctor, and we have some MS in our center as well. And in my like preliminary searches, low testosterone is associated with many neurological disorders and testosterone replacement. So not driving your testosterone through the roof and like juicing, but replacing it to an adequate level seems to have a positive benefit in almost every population I've looked at, except for a few, like prostate cancer. You definitely don't want to take testosterone if you have active prostate cancer. Yeah. No, there's certain situations where, but a lot of what we know about testosterone's effects are actually from prostate cancer populations, because they do androgen deprivation therapy, and then we see how nasty those side effects are. Like it's crucially important for them to heal and get over prostate cancer, but as they're undergoing androgen deprivation therapy, all their other body systems are really struggling. And then once they get over prostate cancer and they can have testosterone reintroduced, health starts to be better. So I just every part of the body, absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
If it's not testosterone, it's metabolites. It's involved in almost everything.
Yeah, no, it's just not a little bit goes a long way, but everything needs at least a little bit. And it's really, from all the research that I've looked into, is that it's just a fact of life, man. You gotta get on the bus or figure out what you're doing. But it's still, would you say that a relatively healthy lifestyle, you're relatively active, you're training, you're staying engaged, that's beneficial as well? And do you know about the patient portal a lot of times now? Your medical records and everything else like that. Now, I would imagine that would be a good place to archive, whatever information you have, so that, instead of keeping like hard copy, whatever it might be, or digital, like that's a place that's got decent storage, so that it's, I would like to believe, at least relatively dependable.
Yeah. So I get my blood work every 6 months, and I was doing it through LabCorp. And they even give you this cool graph that'll show like the trends over time. I think that's hugely beneficial. Sorry, I do have a bit of ADHD and my mind's bouncing around all over. I also wanted to mention that, in our lab, we work with different forms of neuromodulation. So different ways to try to enhance plasticity of the nervous system. We work with electrical stimulation, magnetic stimulation, exercise, but there's also this form of neuromodulation that we're starting to work with here that other groups have done a lot with, called acute intermittent hypoxia. And so that changes the amount of oxygen and CO2 that you're getting with each breath. And then people have tried to pair that with different exercise routines, and they've shown beneficial plasticity and improved motor function.
Now, would you imagine the same thing also pertains to cognitive ability? I was actually involved. Well, of course, I was involved in a what did it say? Intermittent hypoxia. I almost got involved in a thing out in Philadelphia, which is hypercapic. So they enhance it even more. However, they didn't want to pay for this fat boy to go over there, but even still, I just find it, especially they were really beating on the cognition with the hypoxia, and I was just like, there's no way in the world somebody's going to be like, Sean, we're going to, force a little bit more CO2 on you to see what's going to happen. Where I would say, no, I'm not doing that. I was all over that shit, man.
Yeah. So it's my buddy Tommy that I think you've met that works at the center with me. He's done a lot of that work, and it's actually a pretty impressive technique. But what's really interesting to me is that in the animal models, like the experimental models, when they can control everything, they've shown like very beneficial effects of this neuromodulatory technique only if the animals have adequate testosterone. If they don't have adequate testosterone, it doesn't do anything. And so then the question in my brain is, well, what other forms of neuromodulation could be enhanced by adequate testosterone? And, you know, like any epidural stimulation trial throughout the country or world, should we be testing their testosterone before they enter the study and then seeing how well they perform and then seeing like, did people with adequate testosterone perform better? Maybe we should be giving people that have inadequate testosterone replacement therapy before pursuing this neuromodulatory technique, and that will enhance the outcome. That's an open question. I don't know. But that's what I'm interested in. And so my next study, right now, I'm just doing a pretty simple study looking at the effect of intranasal testosterone and the associations between testosterone and neural function. But in my next study, I'm going to make it a longer duration. Instead of 1 month, I'm going to do 3 months, and I'm going to combine it with, you know, task-specific exercise, because I really think that because exercise is a form of neuromodulation. It's a
Pick
form.
me. Pick me.
You're already in. You're already in. If the VA gives me money, please. Yeah, no. I'm very excited for that study because I think it could have some very positive effects.
Well, if there's any way or anything you need me there, I'm there. We just got a question in the chat from a guy, Matt Reed. Do you think diet of a spinal cord injury patient as compared to fully able person, is there any noticeable difference? You know, do you think in spinal cord, maybe you need more of X, but, you know, in able body, maybe, you know, not so much?
It's a really good question. So in general, and I'm going to, you know, speak in generalities. But in general, after spinal cord injury, your basal metabolic rate, so how much energy your body's using just at a base resting state, is decreased. So before your injury, let's say you're eating 2,500 calories a day, and then after your injury, you're eating 2,500 calories a day. Let's just say that that's the case. You could actually gain a lot more weight because you're burning less.
Oh, yeah.
At a base rate, right? And so I think your diet after injury certainly needs to be adjusted. I think it's hugely individually variable. Like some people do really well with a low-fat diet, but some people do better with a low-carb diet. And that's, I am not a nutritionist. I just have to say that. Like nutrition's not my area of expertise at all. But I think what's been shown pretty clearly in almost every population is getting adequate protein is hugely important. And then also trying to get your micronutrients. So making sure, you know, multivitamins not that expensive, you know, taking a multivitamin, that could even help a little bit, right? Because a lot of people like it's a huge, I forget the percentage, but it's a huge percentage of the population in America that is deficient in vitamin D. You know what I mean? So, and vitamin D is involved in the testosterone pathway. And so if we're doing our best to try to make sure we're hitting our daily micronutrients, I think it's going to be favorable for every system.
So you would say, you know, it's really important. Get your fat ass outside. A little fresh air and sunshine is probably actually a really good idea. I'm in.
Beautifully said.
Oh, so eloquently as well.
So eloquent.
Oh, goodness. Doc, let's switch up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, different opportunities as it pertains to spinal cord injury research and things of that nature. Would you say, other than like, spinal cord governmenttrials.gov or something like that, or is they a specific database that maybe would be a little bit more beneficial to somebody at the very least wanting to at least get a glimpse of what the possibilities are or not, or what's actually available, where that might be?
Absolutely. So there's a few. I'll just list off a few, and then I can talk about them a little bit.
Sure.
So there's SCItrialsfinder.net. That's a really good one. SCItrialsfinder.net. Obviously, as you mentioned, there's clinicaltrials.gov. That's not spinal cord injury specific at all. That's in every grant. But then there's also SCItrials.org. That's another good one that's spinal cord injury specific. And then there's also spinalcordinjuryzone.com.
Never heard of that one.
That one
I
was
heard
recent too. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard of the other couple, but spinal cord injury zone. Trust me, after we're done here,
Yeah.
I'm all over that.
And then I also think it's Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. I think that's a good way to find out about ongoing research. And then there's like specific labs of our collaborators that I can mention. But in general, I think those are the places to look for ongoing or upcoming research.
Do you think it would be beneficial if you, like, I don't know, maybe called up a local college and be like, well, what do you guys know about this? Or like a hospital, what do you guys know about this? At least this way, maybe they'd be blowing you off, but maybe they'd be blowing you in a direction of be like, I don't know much, but talk to that guy.
I think that's a great idea. We get those kind of calls all the time, and even when we go out to like the Abilities Expo in New Jersey, we'll have people come up with conditions that we don't necessarily have any studies for, but we know people that can help them or have a study ongoing, and we can pass their information along. And so I think reaching out is always beneficial. It might not lead to something, but it very easily could. So I think that's a great idea.
Where's the Ability? Is that in Somerset?
Oh no, I think
Or AC?
I cannot remember where it's at right now.
Okay, I'll find it.
So sorry about that.
Hey, dude, if you're ever headed out that way,
Yeah.
You need a co-pilot or something along those.
Oh hell yeah.
I'm in.
Nice, awesome.
Give me an idea where you're gonna be at.
You can pick me up too.
Where are you at, man?
I'm from Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Okay, cool.
Home of the Little League World Series.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Had a girl. What do you got, kid? What? You're rather inquisitive.
Are you talking about women specifically? Yeah, so for men, the main way we get our estradiol is through the conversion of testosterone into estradiol. And so estradiol is hugely important, specifically for what I study in cardiovascular function, hugely important. And so we've seen, and something else that's interesting is there's this enzyme called aromatase that's expressed in a lot of different tissues, but it's highly expressed in fat tissue. And so some men, they can have an adequate signaling to make adequate testosterone, but because they have excess fat tissue, a lot of that testosterone is being converted into estradiol. And so they could actually have low testosterone, but high estradiol. And so that's an interesting situation. But then in women, estradiol and testosterone are both hugely important. And even, a lot of women, I know some personally that were like triathletes, but then after menopause, not only does estrogen drop, but testosterone drops too. And they're actually on testosterone replacement, which is keeping them athletic and competitive. But sometimes that's needed. And I think that's something that's often not talked about, because when you hear about hormone replacement therapy for women, you often think estrogen, progesterone, but that's not the only hormones that they're having replaced. I mean, testosterone replacement is fairly common after menopause. Testosterone is hugely important for men and women. I really want to start doing more studies in women because I think there's so little known, unfortunately.
Studies in women dealing with spinal cord injury.
Yeah, spinal cord injury, ALS, and testosterone.
Yeah, well, spinal cord injury, let's face it, that's a boys' game. I think it's like 80-20.
Yeah.
You know, it just shows you how incredibly intelligent we are, or how, you know, careless we are. Trust me. Doesn't take a genius to get here, or it takes a genius to figure out how to better yourself. But, you know, we'll figure out what's going on. But hey, would you say you were just talking about excuse me?
I was asking the guys if they could hear me because of the
okay. No, I can hear
people
you.
in the chat. I've been gaining weight, and I was wondering if it was due to the testosterone. Sorry, I say it wrong every time.
You got it right that time, though.
Because I get all my nutrients from Nutrient 2.0.
Okay.
Yeah, he can't physically eat.
Yeah.
He's on a feeding tube.
Yeah.
Like this little crazy. All his nutrition all comes through a tube, and it's like that blows my mind. I don't quite understand how it works, but he's the guy.
Could that affect me, the testosterone?
Yeah. Have you ever had your testosterone profile checked?
I don't think so. I've only learned about this today.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Do you have a good doctor that you trust?
I have an amazing spinal cord doctor. Her and her team are amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can, you know, I want to get your contact info and send you like a detailed email about specifically what to ask them to test for, because I think it's very important that your doctor assesses where you're at in terms of your, you know, it's called androgen status or testosterone profile, you know, all those markers I mentioned. I think it's hugely important because it's not only to do with how your nutrition is being delivered, but it's like what your gut's absorbing as well. And so I'm biased. Obviously, I'm a nerd about this specific avenue, but I think it's very important. And if it is low, then there's a lot of evidence to show that raising it to a normal range, a physiological level, will have health benefits.
I know for me, I've been tired. Is that a sign?
Chronic fatigue is one of the main symptoms of low testosterone.
Ooh, yeah, baby.
And testosterone is also crucial for immune function as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, crucial for immune function. Crucial, you know, Sean and I have talked, crucial for bone health. You know, that's not something I directly study, but my mentor studies that specifically. You know, testosterone and its metabolite into estradiol, crucial for bone health. Absolutely. They're important for respiratory health, immune function. I'd have to think really hard to find a way that testosterone or its metabolites are not involved in a system.
Well, sorry, Rob.
This is just very interesting. I just really want to know now.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, me too. I want to nerd out about it with you.
Yeah, dude. I'm up in about a month, so I'll give you a heads up on anything. One of the things when we did the DEXA scan, and I keep harping on people about DEXA scans.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously, you know, the one big thing people, you know, they're like, DEXA scan, all right, bone density. But one of the things I have found out is when I was at the lab and we actually did the scan right there, and I was being like, oh, you know what, you didn't really hit the density too much. But you were dealing with body composition and adipose as compared to lean. Now, with that whole thing, you know, also, I know that part of the if you look at the DEXA scan, you actually read it, it gives you an idea of what your caloric intake should be, because you're this age, or your weight is this is what's going on. So I think mine was like maybe like 1600, which I have that for breakfast. So you know what I mean. However, they do the adipose as compared to the lean. Now, do you think that would be a really, really good idea in order to have an idea of what's going on with that entire thing? I'm a big fan. That you already know that.
I think body composition is hugely important. That's actually where I got my start in research, was body composition. And so, DEXA, everybody hears DEXA and thinks bone mineral density, bone health, and that's what it was originally designed for. And it's really, really good for that purpose. But the newer versions of DEXA can measure bone, lean mass, which is muscle plus water, and also fat mass. But not only that, it can differentiate between types of fat mass. So we have, right underneath our skin, we have subcutaneous fat, or adipose tissue.
Visceral.
That can actually, the subcutaneous can be an energy store that is beneficial, like evolutionarily. Like if we run out of food, our body can start to use that. But then, as you said, we have this visceral adiposity, which is around our abdominal organs. And that's been shown to be highly associated with cardiometabolic risk and cardiometabolic disease. And there's some different explanations for why that might be. That visceral adiposity can dump free fatty acids and inflammatory chemicals called cytokines directly into the system. And so having a lot of visceral adiposity is associated with bad cardiometabolic outcomes. And so I think tracking that over time, especially after injury, to know, my visceral adiposity was at this level when I was first injured, but now 5 years later, I'm not doing so well. My blood work doesn't look so good, and my visceral adipose tissue is much higher. We need to figure out a good exercise regimen and maybe switch up the diet. I think the more data everyone has about themselves gives them more power to control their health. So I think it's very, very important.
I had said that I had sent my DEXA scan over to Angry Quad, and there wasn't much information in it. I got it because I needed to stand. I was wondering if there is a different scan and how I get all the information that I need.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate because what's this? Oh yeah, exactly. Adipose is fat and lean is muscle and also water.
Yes.
We'd have to do other tests to decide like how much water you have compared to muscle. But yeah, so the DEXA with any imaging, it's very complicated because they usually want to be very specific. So like typically when you get a DEXA scan, they're probably only going to do like the wrist, the hips, and lower back. I think that's the standard. So they'll be looking for bone mineral density in those specific areas to see if you have low bone mineral density, to see if we need to treat that.
Yeah.
Typically, they're not looking at lean mass, fat mass, different types of fat mass. And if you want to know about total body bone mineral density, I think that's something that you'll have to request and ask from your doctor, because otherwise they're just going to do the standard few sites and give you that information. You know what I mean? So I think being communicative with your doctor and knowing what to ask for is hugely important. But it's always hard to know what to ask for, you know?
Yeah. Would you say a full body scan along with a full body scan report, along with not only density, but also, body mass and all, body composition?
I think, a total body scan, I think, is a great idea to give you an overall view of your body composition, fat, lean. Total body scan won't give you much information about bone health, but then you can get specific. You can do the hips, you can do the knee, you can do the ankle, sites that are likely to fracture after injury. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've, not spoiled being part of, spinal cord injury research, because you got to have broken ear something rather to get involved. But however, dealing with, people like yourself and Dr. Cernigliero, almost every scan that I get is just page after page after page. I first looked at it, I had no idea. Chris basically grabbed me by the hand. He was like, okay, Sean, are you going to pay attention? And now if I speak to you or someone else, it almost sounds like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But, others, I don't know what to tell them. And Rob was pointing out, he had sent me his DEXA scan, and it was basically like a paragraph, at the bottom of a page. I was like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with this, because I've never seen something so simplified.
Yeah.
Like I say, I get, a ream every time that I go, and, Chris actually takes a minute or two. So, but it's,
well, and that's the thing, people like Chris Cernigliero, there's not many humans like him. I wish more people were like him. He's got the knowledge, and he's the most knowledgeable person I've ever met when it comes to body composition and DEXA, for sure.
I when I first met him, I thought he had like some type of Down syndrome, and or maybe he was like a savant or something. I was just going like this. What are you talking about?
No.
And Chris, he just sort of chuckles, and he regurgitates more information than you ever thought anybody can cram into their head.
No, yeah, he is an amazing brain. Such a good guy.
Oh yeah, no, he's a good man. He's a good man.
And a vet. So cool.
Do you just work with vets or everyone?
Yeah, primarily I work with everybody, but yeah, primarily veterans, just because I work at the VA hospital.
Yes. Move.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'll just, again, my bias, I'll just say that testosterone is hugely important for bone mineral density. So if you have low, I think replacing a physiological level of testosterone is hugely important. But then if you still have bone health issues, there's a lot of different, and this is not my area of expertise, so I'm speaking a bit outside of my field, but there's bisphosphonates, there's different drugs like romosozumab. So there's drugs that can either help improve bone building, prevent bone degradation, or a combination of those. And
they're all pretty much calcium. What do you call it? Calcium supplements. Just also now with all that, do you think like a nice dose of K2 in order to delegate where those calcium molecules go as well?
I think K2 is really important. I take K2 with my vitamin D. So I take K2. I believe that it's very important. But in addition to just calcium supplements, there are drugs that specifically upregulate the osteoblast and downregulate osteoclast. So the bone forming versus the bone resorbing. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different drugs out there. They're commonly prescribed for postmenopausal women because that's the population most likely to have fractures. But at our center, we're actually testing a few of those drugs.
Really?
And we've seen some good preliminary effects. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But no, I know, the normal level of decent bone health is typically at 0 or -1. Am I correct in my assumption, or is it right around there before we get into pania?
So that's just called a T-score, which is just a standard deviation. And so, yeah, if you're 1 or 2 standard deviations below the population average, that's a big deal. Absolutely.
Yeah, do me a favor. Explain a T-score and a Z-score real quick. Be so kind.
Oh, God.
I know what it is, but
honestly, I can't remember the difference between a T and a Z-score right now because I don't work with it so often. But they're essentially, if the population average, the norm is here, if you're either one standard deviation below or two is we're very concerned and we need to treat this. One
Yes.
is we need to be on the alert and make sure it doesn't get worse.
Well,
That's
to the best of my knowledge, I believe the T-score is whatever your density is as compared to a healthy, a healthy human being at anywhere from 25 to 30 years old, which is maxed out for like bone density health. And then
Okay.
the Z-score is basically compared to your age group, your sex, and basically your ethnicity, which is sort of strange. But I mean,
okay.
at least that's I'm sorry, that's what Dr. Cernigliero taught me. So
He told you that? I believe
yeah,
it.
he beat me
He
up on
knows
several times.
That's his area. He's an expert. I'm not an expert in health by any means.
Yeah, I tell you, going back to him, and every now and then, it's almost like the guy's giving me a test.
Yeah.
Like, he'll ask me a myriad of questions. He'll be like, "Sean, you know this," and I was just like, "Give me a sec, dude. My mind's just stopped working because you asked me something." And he was like, "Come on, dude, drop down the ADHD or whatever it is. Come on, let's focus." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm working on that."
I was asking about information on trials and how I can get in.
Yeah, completely depending on the trial. So some trials, like currently right now, not to throw a plug in here, but currently right now we're working on the first psilocybin study in spinal cord injury. And that's funded by the Department of Defense. And we have an adequate budget that we can afford to have people come and stay with us to do that study. So it's really study dependent, because my study right now, like I said, it's a training grant. I'm being mentored by people. It's not much money, so I couldn't really afford to pay for people's travel or stay. But in larger trials, people can certainly afford to pay for that. So it's worth exploring and asking those questions. But yeah, I would also like to plug the first psilocybin study in spinal cord injury. We've been ignored forever, and now we're testing it. That's pretty exciting. I'm pretty stoked.
What do you need to know?
Yeah.
Hey, are you experienced? Guilty. However, I'm curious with the psilocybin study. What do you suppose? Well, actually, what are you looking for? Is it just depression or engagement or anything in particular?
So because because in the literature it's all around depression, that's our primary outcome. We're looking at depressive symptoms and if we can improve that. But the really exciting part for me is the exploratory outcomes. And so we're looking at spasticity, neural control of motor function, neural control of cardiovascular function. We're looking at, deeper than depression, we're looking at like multiple measures of quality of life. We're also looking at, how their companion or caretaker, how their impression has changed. We're looking at a whole bunch of stuff. Because for as long as psilocybin and psychedelic research has been going on, unfortunately, people with spinal cord injury have been excluded because of the secondary complications, right? This is too scary. We don't want to fuck anything. Oh, sorry. We don't want to mess anything up. So people have just excluded people with spinal cord injury. They've not had the opportunity to participate in these trials. And now, for the first time, and we have a lot of anecdotal reports. We're working with members of the community that came to us and have articles published about them, about their experience. And so we have anecdotal reports that it can improve motor control, spasticity, mood, quality of life, low blood pressure. It can even improve that. And so, again, these are anecdotal reports, not peer-reviewed evidence. But I think that's enough evidence for us to really carefully examine this and see how beneficial it can be. I'm pretty excited for it.
Sort of curious as it pertains to spasticity. Is this while under the influence or is this lasting effects? And as well, I'm guessing that considering you're dealing with vets, is those suffering from PTSD, I would imagine it's also beneficial, sort of in the same way, but is under the influence or long-term effects thereafter?
So most of the long-term effects have been on, depressive symptoms and mood. But some of the more acute effects, in terms of spasticity is, let me just say that I know some individuals that use recreational substances, and it creates spasms, but it creates functional spasms. And when you're creating a spasm, you're getting activation of that motor unit and you're getting blood flow to that area. And so could that have a long-term positive effect? That's something I'm very interested in that we don't really know yet.
It's also sorry.
Oh,
Well, do you think there'd be any value in, like, the term microdosing, which I think is a crock, but still at the same time, I know that it's out there.
that's actually one of the guys that we work with. We have it's called a panel of lived experience. And one of the guys that has had papers published about him and his experience does daily microdosing. So a dose well below a psychedelic effect. And he swears by it. And he says a lot of people he knows swear by it. And that's like kind of in the pipeline for us. We want to examine that. We're going to see how this study does, but then we want to look at microdosing because, it's completely plausible that uninjured people microdosing might not have the same effect as after the nervous system's been injured. It could have a more profound effect.
Well, once again, I'm not looking to put my my head in a noose, but I let's just say I know a guy that it looked a hell of a lot like me, where a couple of years back, somewhere, somehow, and by somebody, and names will remain innocent or anonymous to protect the innocent, however. And that certain someone decided to, at least this is what I've heard, decided to dose up a little bit. And that certain person ended up with major increased spasticity for over an hour.
Yeah.
His legs were flailing everywhere. And it was like almost annoying.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, whoa. And, that same person decided that maybe this isn't the best idea.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, would you imagine, obviously, you guys are just kicking off with this entire thing.
Yeah.
Would that create the illusion of enhanced signals going down this cord or something along those lines, or perhaps maybe a cross wire? Or I don't know exactly how to, use that term, but
I think the cool thing about, I don't know if illusion's the right word, because, serotonin, is crucial for nerve signals and for movement. And psilocybin and other psychedelics are serotonergic. They activate those same receptors. And so if there is a preserved connection, it's plausible that psilocybin or drugs like it can help enhance the strength of that connection.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like rewiring?
Yeah. Like I'm hesitant to. I've not seen direct evidence of rewiring, but I think like in general that's a good way to think of it, because it's very rare that a spinal cord injury completely cuts through and transects the entire cord, right? Normally there's some preserved signal. And then we've seen through different neuromodulation techniques in research that we can enhance and also maybe cause reorganization of those signals or connections. And so I think that's plausible. Yeah, absolutely.
Perhaps maybe a private research study from the guy that I know.
Yeah.
I'll talk to him about it.
All right, cool.
Shall I have him keep notes?
Yes. Detailed notes.
Okay. Well, considering he may be doing some type of mind expanding chemical, I would imagine that notes might be extremely detailed. However, I'll give him a call after we deal with this and kick around the idea.
Appreciate you.
Which ones? Spastic activity. Okay.
That's a really good question. There are some reports that spasms can be metabolically healthy and improve muscle. Obviously, if you're having such severe spasms that it's like interrupting your daily life, that's not good. But there's some evidence that having spasms is a sign of like residual motor unit function.
I only have spasms in my abdomen.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if spastic activity is going to, enhance muscular, whatever you want to call it, mass, or if it's just perhaps maybe sort of maintain a little bit. But then again, how intense, how long? It's like anything else. If you train 10 minutes a year, you're not going to be, Schwarzenegger at the end of the month, at the end of the year. However, if you do something every day and you beat yourself up with it, you're probably going to have a much better result if that's what you're looking for. However, when is spastic activity helpful and then harmful?
Right. Yeah.
It's
Delicate balance for sure. But in general, I think spasms are a sign that there's a residual connection there. And so if there is a residual connection, then maybe we can harness that and improve that. But yeah, too much spasms are very bad.
Yeah. Well, but beyond anything else, I got to tell you, Doc, I think this was a fantastic show. I really want to thank you very much. It's just, I can talk to you for the next 3 hours. No problem. And by the way, my suggestion is never let me in your lab again, because we won't get anything done, because I'll have you yabbering on for the rest of forever. With that outline that you sent, I was just like, oh, I'm reading it like this. When you wish you knew before? And I was like, oh my God, he's a bastion of information. Damn.
Thank you so much.
Neither here nor there. But listen, it's getting a little too late for this fat boy, so I got to rock and roll, kids. Doc, thank you very much. Rob, thank you very much. Tara, do whatever you got to do. Any problems you think I can help you out, you know how to get in touch with me.
Thank you so much for the invite.
I was just saying that.
However,
I knew my mic was all messed up.
yeah, you're all muted, dude. I mean, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Bye.
I was just telling him that I'm glad we had him on the show and that I have learned a lot.
Oh, so glad.
We would definitely like him to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, feel free to get my contact info. We could chat for sure.
No problem. My next mark is going to be Sir Nigliero. But however, Angry Quad signing off. Gentlemen, ladies, see you.
See you guys.